to make objects for the Oba and the court, and the rituals and ceremonies are still performed. The objects displayed here were made between the 15th and 19th century. How little has changed over the decades since February 1899, when Charles Hercules Read and Omode readathon, the keeper and senior assistants, respectively, in the Department of British and Medieval Antiquities and Ethnography at the British Museums, introduced their catalogue, Antiquities from the City of Benin, by telling the same story of ambush and retaliation. Objects obtained by the recent successful expedition sent to Benin to punish the native of that city for a treacherous massacre of his peaceful English mission, with the following notes of explanation. Benin City lies on a high sandy plain to the north of the Niger Delta in Edo State, Nigeria, in an area of former tropical forests. Today, it is a city of 1.5 million people and the center of a major pre-colonial kingdom of the Niger Delta, which once controlled the land and river system that connected the African interior with the maritime world of the Bight of Benin and the Atlantic Ocean. The city first emerged during a period of urbanization and state formation along the tropical belt of West Africa. Some 1,000 years ago, we saw the emergence of great centers of Edo, Yoruba, and Akan pre-colonial states: Bini, Ife, Ilesa, Oyo, Kumasi, Bego, with Aja and Fun states. Urban politics, such as Dahomey, emerging later. From the 16th century, the Kingdom of Benin has been ruled by an unbroken line of Obas that began with Ewari I, who reigned from 140 CE, a century before Queen Elizabeth I came to the English throne, and had its origins in the late Iron Age urban society of the 10th or 11th century CE onward. When he was crowned in 2016, the current Oba, Ewai II, became the 40th Oba in an unbroken line across 8 centuries. The kingdom grew in power and scope during an involvement in European and transatlantic trade from the 16th century, at first with Portuguese trader and later British and French. Central among which was the slave trade. By the 19th century, Benin City was a sacred monumental landscape of courthouses, compound, mausoleums, and centers of royal and religious power, encompassed in an ancient network of dished and bank earthwork. with a central repositories of thousands of antique artifacts that bore witness to the kingdom past, a kind of unseen city, a center for changing forms of religions, observance, and royal powers over centuries. The sacking of the city more than 12 decades ago involved the looting of more than 10,000 royals and sacred objects. The immense loss in the British cultural atrocities at Benin City is coming into view for white museum staff in Europe and North America in the 2020s. But in truth, it has always been hypervisible for some museum visitors, and for so many more, unable or unwilling ever to step their foot inside an anthropological, ethnological, ethnographic vercude or newly rebranded World Culture Museum. The new awareness among curators refracted through a new enthusiasm for discolonization in ways, if not indeed, comes not through some soothing enlightenment to the intertwined history of anthropology and empire, or to the processes of institutional racism on the part of either the bureaucrats or the connoisseurs of these red brick steel girded railway stations like edifices. This new scrabble for discolonization throws up new dangers of obfuscation, of tokenism, of the co-option of activities, of the appropriation of the labor of source, descendant and disappropriate African communities, of the consolation of a standing debt of 1,000 varieties of sidestep that allows violence to persist. But here, the loss can be seen in a new way, nothing less. Why is this, and why now? Not always easy. My Voyage from Obscurity by Greg Ogbefu. ISBN 978-978-986-0371. Chapter 11. My children, arrows in the quivers. In many ways, children define us. They reflect who we are and what we represent. A man's children could be his greatest source of pride or the reason for his deepest shame. We respect titles like presidents, prime ministers, CEO, managing directors, and so on. But in reality, no title is as important as dad or mom. Parents shape the world. Well, at least my parents shaped my world. They taught me values that stayed with me in my life. Even when They did not teach me things. Through talking, I practiced many things I saw them do. Only my children can accurately assess how I have been as a father. Still, regardless of my shortcoming in that important area of life, I know I have always loved every one of my children very deeply, in a way that is difficult to articulate. I suspect this is not peculiar to me. It is the story of the average parent out there. My children are no more kids. Most of them are adults who are successful in their field. Why I share their stories in this chapter, it is actually my story I am telling, in line with what I have tried to do throughout this book, to show that my path was not always easy, that as human we fail and succeed, we rise, we fall. Nevertheless, we must constantly move on. Natasha. Growing up, Natasha never lacked anything except her father's presence and love. Because of her grandparents, she had the best of many things in life. With her mother Rain, they all provided all her need and helped her to grow up happy. As she grew, however, she began to question her mom about her dad, but never got responses adequate to satisfy her curiosity. Rain had obviously moved on and closed the chapter of her life where my story was written. When Natasha got into the university at the age of 18, she began to look for her dad earnestly. I was in my office one day when my phone rang. It was a foreign number. I picked it up, and it was Professor Rain on the line. I was shocked. She apologized for calling out of the blue and said she did not mean to intrude into my life. I felt a mixture of emotions on hearing her voice. Rain wanted me to know that our daughter, Natasha, had been asking to know who her father was and where he was over time. Rain said she never wanted to go into details with Natasha because she did not know where I was anymore. Apparently, however, Natasha had gone on the internet and downloaded the profiles of 3 people who bore Gregory Ogbefun and were Nigerians. Natasha showed the profiles to her mom and asked, "Which of these is my dad?" Because Rain knew I was a mariner, she picked the mariner out of the 3. "That is your father. That is his surname, but don't contact him. He does not know you. I will contact him. If he wants to interact with you, he will ask me for your number, and I will give it to him." Rain had told Natasha. Rain narrated everything to me over the phone. Within me was a deep sense of excitement and regret at the same time. I felt pain for Natasha, and yet I felt love. She was the daughter I had abandoned, the one who never knew her father because he had lacked the courage to confront reality of her existence due to a broken heart. Without wasting a second, I called Natasha. She was at the time schooling at the University of Virginia, and of course, as could be expected, she was bearing her grandfather's surname. My name is Gregory Ogbefun. I am your dad. I said this to her over the phone. She asked, "Who did you say?" And when I repeated who I was, she burst out crying and asked, "Where have you been?" I started crying too. After half an hour of emotional expressions, the phone call ended, and I immediately booked a flight for the next weekend to Richmond, USA. All through the following week, I could barely wait for the weekend. And when it finally came, the trip to Richmond seemed longer than any other trip I have taken to the USA before. On that flight, my mind replayed everything that happened from the time I met Rain over and over again. I had 1,001 questions unanswered. Natasha was at the arrival hall, which is 8 miles north of Charlottesville in Albemarle County, Virginia, eager to receive me. The moment I saw her, I looked at her forehead and eyes, and I knew that this was my daughter. We ran to each other and hugged. We spent the weekend together, talking day and night, non-stop, trying to pack 19 years into 3 days. She was happy, as I was too. I told her about my family, the children, and everything. She fed me in with her stories of growing up till age 19. And in the university, I could not spoil her enough as I took her shopping everywhere. By the time I connected with Natasha, she was in the university studying biological science. It was a preliminary course for medicine. I am not sure how she ended up choosing that career path, but during our first few days together, I observed she had a very legal mind. You cannot say something without her getting you to justify your perspective and engaging you in a discussion. Much like me, she's a good talker and can hold her own. Every time we talked about our biological science and medicine, I could not see a natural interest in her. After my visit, we rented a car and drove to Richmond to Boston with me at the steering wheel. The journey to Boston accorded us close to 6 hours of talking and laughing as we got to know each other more. We saw similarities in our mannerism and we bonded. At a gas station, we stopped for a cup of coffee and got back into the car and chatted all the way to Boston. Along the way, I asked if she really wanted to be a doctor. I pointed out to her that it seems like she would make a better lawyer than a doctor. Surprisingly, she said law would have been her preferred option. So, why are you trying to do what you don't like? I asked. I encouraged her to go for what she would like to study. Natasha phoned her mother and I told her that it was my opinion and impression that Natasha should consider looking at a career in law because she has a natural gift in that area, and the mother agreed. I felt proud to have been involved in something major in her life for the first time. After her first degree, Natasha went to Suffolk University in Boston and studied law and got a master's degree in the same field. Though Natasha loved Nigeria from visiting a couple of times, a few incidents have discouraged her from coming back. On one of her visits, she narrowly escaped a Chanchagi plane crash in Lagos. It was a terrible experience that left her badly shaken. Following that horrible experience in Lagos, she was flying Air France, going to Paris. After the waiting time in Paris to connect to Boston, as they were in the aircraft getting ready to taxi, a bomb scare forced an excavation. Since then, she has not come this direction at all. Christopher. My first son came from my first wife, Cecilia, in 1983. He was my pride and joy. I named him Christopher Osasun Ogbefun. Christopher is brilliant, sharp, and charismatic. He was 2.5 years old when his mother and I parted ways. And 2.5 years later, after the divorce, I was given custody of himself and sister, Iro. Before I was granted custody, and during the time of my separation from Cecilia, the children had been living with her. I put Christopher and Iro in Montessori International School in Port Harcourt. I always encouraged their mom to have access to them as much as she wanted, because I believe every child needs both parents to be emotionally balanced. For his secondary school education, Christopher went to Guinness Education Center in Benin, an Ivy League of secondary schools in Edo State at the time. It was when he went to Guinness that later I began to notice some worrying traits in him. Things got bad that a few times he was nearly expelled from school. He began to move with peers who did not exactly influence him to be better than he was. Unfortunately and regrettably, his mother and I have different opinions about disciplining him. Let us say that Christopher viewed me as a bad parent and his mother as a supportive one. When I noticed that things were getting out of hand because the school kept calling my attention to his behavior, I considered moving Christopher and Iro out of Benin completely. So Lagos is worse. Though Iro had no problem whatsoever in Igbinedion, I did not want them separated. Consequently, I put the both of them in Graceland College, Idimu, Lagos. Within 2 months of resuming at Graceland, Christopher was locked up in the school cell as a discipline for some serious misdemeanor. Despite his behavioral conduct, he was academically bright and had all the traits of a young man capable of doing great things. Fortunately, he finished from Christland and returned to Port Harcourt. After Christland, I asked Christopher that what he would like to do next. He said he wanted to be a marine engineer. That excited me a lot. Gladly, I asked him for some questions and spoke with him extensively about options in marine engineering. All the schools he applied to in the USA offered Christopher the opportunity to do a degree program in marine engineering. I knew that career-wise, he was better off going for professional training option like I did because of market demand. But I was not going to impose anything on him. I still do not believe parents should impose choices of career on children, but one can counsel and guide them. Incidentally, at the same time, I was already a resource person at the Maritime Academy of Nigeria, Oron. That year, during their annual passing out event, I had presented a paper as usual, but I had to return to Port Harcourt for an important board meeting. This meant I could not be at the ceremonial passing out parade. But I wanted Christopher and Iro to witness it. So, I got one of my expatriate staff at the shipyard to take them to Oron. They had a good time there. And later that night, Christopher told me he would like to go to the Maritime Academy, Oron. He had finally decided on the type of marine engineer he wanted to be. So, off he went to the Maritime Academy, Oron. Annually, the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Company, LNNG, goes to Oron to screen, test, interview, and shortlist cadets for the academy for their training program. Successful cadets are given scholarship to Europe to continue their training. In the second year, LNNG gave Christopher a scholarship. He left for Glasgow College of Nautical Studies in Glasgow, Scotland, renamed the City of Glasgow College since 2010. He continued his maritime engineering studies. Unfortunately, while he was at the Maritime Academy, those unsavory characters manifested again, but they were tamed largely by the paramilitary regime. At Glasgow, Christopher seemed more matured, and it looked like the academy had helped him develop discipline. I went to visit him a few times, and I was quite impressed by his comportment. But as much as it appeared like the academy was molding him, Christopher was getting more and more involved in Gaslow's social life. He was rocking the city outside of the time at the academy. In the course of that, he got a Scottish girl in the family way and had a daughter. I did not mind that because it was his life, but I, as well as his sponsors, LNNG, knew he needed to return to Nigeria with the requisite qualification he was there to acquire. Eventually, Christopher called to inform me that he has passed his examination. I was excited about the good news. The next step was for him to return to Nigeria and go to sea. But unknown to me, he had not passed the examination as he claimed. That exam, if he had passed, would have earned him second-class certificate of competency. When I realized he had been deceiving me, I was devastated. LNNG gave Christopher opportunities to go back repeatedly, but he did not want any of that. So, he became an uncertified cadet officer. I insisted that he go back to retake the examination, but he remained adamant. Meanwhile, report had gotten to me that he was one of the best practical engineers at NLNG. Further confirming what I had always known, my son was brilliant. This inspired me to try all I could to persuade him to reconsider. Still, he was bent on his way, and sadly, after a while, LNNG had to let him go because of behaviors not tolerated by the organization and the industry. Coupled with the inability to progress career-wise due to lack of qualification, it hurts me that Christopher had struggled to overcome his problems without success. Due to it, he has been unable to take advantage of many opportunities that has come his way. By now, he should be the chief operation officer of my company and be getting ready to become the chief executive officer. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It pains me that my first son, who has my blood running through his veins, finds it difficult to locate his path. I love him dearly, but I cannot make choices for him any longer. Only parents can understand how situations like these hurt. Nevertheless, I have not given up on him. Daily, I pray for him and keep telling him that it is never too late to get his life back on course, because the race is not for the swift or the battle for the strong, but of him that wills. It is the grace of God that makes the difference. I can never give up on any of my children. I will always hope for the best for them. Christ never gave up on any of us. So, why should we give up on anyone? God has given, God never gives up on us, no matter our failings, and I remain conscious of the spiritual implications of having that mindset. I am constantly looking at for the slightest sign of hope. When the prodigal son comes to himself, I shall arise and go to my father. The father stood outside, waiting for the prodigal son to come. When he saw him from afar, he ran to him and hugged him. The same thing applies to my son. Whenever he says, I will go to my father, I will be there waiting for him. And it does not have to be the Greg or Bethune waiting for him as a father. God will always be there waiting for him. Iogama. My third child is Iogama Blessing. Thank you very much. I'll be going on a 5 minutes break. I'm reading the book Not Always Easy, My Voyage from Obscurity by Greg Obefu. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mommy. I'm really appreciative. Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ma.
I'm so
Thank you, Ma.
impressed
Thank you, Ma.
with you. I'm so proud of you. Yeah? I came to support you, to let you know how very proud of you we are.
Thank you, Ma.
And what a marvelous role model you're becoming for
Thank you, Ma.
the young girls of Edo State and of Nigeria and practically of the world.
Thank you, Ma.
You're making us so proud.
Thank you,
You're a
Ma.
strong girl.
Thank you,
And we
Ma.
are proud of you. And we're here
Thank
to
you very
support
much,
you.
Ma. Thank you
I'll
very
keep
much.
coming from
Thank
time
you.
to time until you're finished.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ma.
And I expect that you will go through this successfully.
Amen.
You will not, your strength and energy and concentration and determination will not diminish.
Amen.
So we keep coming to strengthen you.
Thank you.
Okay? We're holding your hand up
Thank you very
to make
much,
sure it
Ma.
doesn't fall down.
Thank you,
And that
Ma.
you make us proud ultimately.
Thank you,
Okay?
Ma.
You're
Yes,
strong.
Ma.
I know you'll make it.
Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you, Mommy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ma. Thank you, Ma. Medics. How many more?
Your clothes is missing by the side.
Yeah. It's,
Very quickly. She doesn't have time to waste. Okay.
thank you.
Then
Thank
one
you.
with just me and her.
Time. Chapter 11. I was reading about the family. Please, time. I start now. Iogama. My third child is Iogama Blessing, Christopher, immediate younger sister. Iyo, as we call her for short, is special. From childhood, she had been academically exceptional and an athlete interested in sprinting. Iyo excelled. Iyo excelled in all her exams in school and always came home with reports of exceptional behavior and traits of leadership. At age 17, she got admission into the University of Massachusetts in Boston, And I remember she cried a lot when I was leaving her there to return to Nigeria. Her tears broke my heart and made me start crying too. I was wondering why I had to leave my little several thousand of miles away from Nigeria.